All right, Mark, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Right after January 1st, we're kicking off 2026. I'm really excited for all the podcasts we're going to do this year. And the first one that we have is really interesting. We've got Liam Donoghue. He's the senior research manager at PeopleForBikes, the largest bike industry nonprofit. You and I have both been very involved there in different ways. They do great work. And Liam is really interesting because he's doing all the research. He's got his hands on the data, right? And so we might feel like this is happening or that, but he actually knows because he's doing all the research into the, what the riders and shops and brands are all doing.
Yeah, Liam, this is not the expense of any of the guests we've had, but Liam's my favorite guest so far because we have these feelings, and you and I sit on lots of calls with lots of people and hear from lots of brands and people deep in the industry, and we get these data points and it gives us a feeling, but we never have like a joined up perspective. And Liam, because of this position at People4Bikes, has a joined up perspective on things like the fact that bike sales are down, but participation is up, which is a weird one. And even though bike sales are down, e-bike sales are up. He has so much data like that really puts something analytical to the feelings that we're all having. And I really appreciated it. I could see having Liam on once a quarter because he's just so tapped into what's actually happening in the bike industry.
Yeah. And I personally find that such an interesting kind of contrast in tension that less bikes are selling, but more people are riding. Like, wait, you got to really think that through. And the idea that e-bikes are, still increasing. I mean, look, I just had a call today with a bike retailer in Minneapolis, an old friend of mine from high school who works at the shop, and they only sell e-bikes. And he says they're doing great with e-bikes. It's going really well. So anyway, so I think you all will find this episode really interesting, and let's go ahead with it now. Liam Donoghue from People4Bikes.
Let's do it.
All right, we're here with Liam Donoghue, the senior research manager from People4Bikes, which is an amazing organization, the largest really bike industry nonprofit. Liam, handling research, has so many great insights that he's going to share with us today.
Liam, to kick things off, maybe you could tell us about your role at People4Bikes. I think more importantly, sort of the dual mission of People4Bikes. There's two sides to it, and I think they're both interesting and really vital to supporting the bike industry and getting more people on bikes.
Yes. Well, first off, thank you both for having me. Super excited to be here. Long-time listener, first-time participant. But yeah, very, very fun mission at People4Bikes. And like you said, there's a dual nature. So there's the coalition and the foundation side. And so I am on the coalition side. And so what I am doing as senior research manager is looking a lot at consumer participation and sales data and the inventory, and trying to paint a picture kind of what's going on, for the industry, for the suppliers, the brands who are our members. We also have the foundation side, where we allow any individual membership now, and we're doing a ton of work to advance policy and infrastructure. We have folks on our team who are working in Washington to lobby for better biking bills, to kill the bad biking bills, and then really working with all 50 of the states and Washington D.C. to improve bike riding and participation across the country.
Hey, Liam, thank you for that. And I know your main purview is research. Can you tell us about how you do research and why it's important? Like, are you doing qualitative or quantitative? What is the kind of research you do and why is it important?
Yeah, so we do a little bit of all of them, and we work with a lot of partners. Obviously, we have a pretty small team as a nonprofit. I think there's 25, 26 of us. Don't quote me on that. And so I work with several different contractors to help us put out all sorts of quantitative and qualitative research. So to kind of quickly go through a lot of them, we work with EcoCounter to do studies on, they kind of put together ridership studies. So they're getting counter data of folks who are actually, you know, riding over those little pneumatic tubes around the country, and they're putting that data together for us. We work with S&P Global, and they put together both kind of a country risk analysis for the supply chain. So there's 6 kind of the big import countries that we have for bikes, and we're using all of S&P Global's data that's telling us kind of what are those risks, what's going on geopolitically in those countries that may impact the supply side of things, along with a demand model. So they're taking all of our historical sales data and they're putting that into a forecast to say, oh, okay, we think these are the number of bike units that are going to sell in the next 3-4 years. From an actual sales and inventory perspective, we work with Circana, formerly the NPD Group, and they work with individual retailers, IBD retailers, get point of sale inventory and sales data, and they then project out to the market to say X number of e-bikes, X number of road bikes, Y number of bike light were sold in the last month, the last 12 months, year to date, et cetera. Those are kind of some of the big ones. But then we also run our own survey. So every 2 years, we run a participation survey. We just put one out at the end of last year. We'll be putting another one out in about 10 months from now. And then we also we're part of PeopleForBikes is part of the Physical Activity Council, which is this group of 7 different sports organizations like ours. So we work with golf, soccer, Outdoor Industry Association, snow sports, tennis, and I may be forgetting another one. And we all pool our resources together to put out an annual survey that is similar, but asks a lot more questions and gets a lot of kind of that cross participation so that we know, hey, if you're riding a bike, well, you're also maybe playing paddleball, those sorts of things. And that's kind of about it. There's a whole host of other ones, but I won't belabor the point.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we've been running into, like, Peter and I both been in the industry a long time, is so many of the companies in the industry are privately held and don't have to report public data of any sort. How do you, is that a problem for you? If it is, how do you work around it? How do you get reliable information to support the work that you're doing?
Yeah, and so we're not necessarily trying to look too hard at individual brands and how individual brands are doing or not doing compared year over year. And like you said, we're certainly following the publicly traded ones to be able to use that information kind of peripherally to triangulate what's going on with the market. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we're not necessarily worried kind of about market share for specific brands. We're really worried about kind of what's the industry as a whole doing, what categories are doing well or not doing well. And so we're kind of, the Switzerland in a way of not necessarily worried too much about individual brands. We want to make sure that we're doing what we can and supporting the policy that we can to prop the industry as a whole up.
Hey, Liam, I want to ask you about, because you have your hands on so much data, and I can imagine you're learning a lot. Since we're right at the beginning of 2026, what are the trends that you see right now? The biggest, like if you had to pull down the 3 or 5 biggest insights that you're getting right now, and where are we headed in the next 12 months?
Yeah, I think the biggest one that we've been talking about a bunch, and I'll talk about it again here in the event that your viewers and listeners haven't necessarily heard me talk about it or write about it, is really just that bike unit sales are down and continue to be down after a big peak during the pandemic of 2020, 2021, where we saw just this massive, massive spike in growth. Well, bike units have been steadily dwindling, while at the same time, participation numbers are suggesting more people are out there riding than ever before. And so we're always trying to square away what's going on with these two numbers. Is this a replacement cycle piece where just people are out riding, but they're not feeling the need to buy a new bike as often as they were in the past? So really, it's that kind of dwindling bike unit number, the increase in participation, and then really the kind of pockets of categories that are showing much more signs of positive growth or kind of near flat growth when a lot of the market is contracting. And those would include helmets, which are kind of the consumables that folks who are out riding year in, year out need to replace. We're seeing bike shop service increasing year over year. Some of that's just increased labor cost, but we suspect some of that may also be because people are getting their bikes worked on more often than they did before. rather than buying a new bicycle. And then similarly, repair stands and maintenance type products are also up year over year, which we suppose is kind of same sort of thing, just folks not taking bikes into the shop, but working on their bikes themselves.
Have you, within all the data, are you seeing things? I think you've connected a lot of dots in really interesting ways. Like helmets is just a really interesting stat. Have you found statistics that to you just don't add up and you're not really clear what it's indicating?
There is some of that. One of the big things that we're certainly watching a ton of, and I'm probably not the first person on your podcast to say this, but maybe I am, the word tariff. But certainly we're watching tariffs and watching the impact that tariffs are having on prices of bikes. And so certainly the kind of big question for us really is, in e-bikes, for example, despite tariffs, despite a lot of other kind of economic sort of pieces suggesting that a lot of prices of everything, inflation, are all going up, we're actually seeing the average selling prices of e-bikes coming down in a lot of arenas. So at the IBD level, we're seeing average selling prices come down, especially given how much e-bikes were discounted in 2023 and 2024 just because of that oversupply. That makes it even more kind of, holy cow. We think a lot of it is just that because the proliferation of e-bikes and there are more inexpensive e-bikes out on the market now, and that's driving new folks in to say, oh, I would never have bought an e-bike at $1,200, but now I can get one at $750, I'm in. And so we're kind of seeing an influx of folks down at that bottom price point.
Right. And I think one of the things that Peter and I have seen with the clients we work with is there's significant amounts of product, especially e-bikes, that are in warehouses that have been since well before the tariffs that are still getting sold down. And so I can see how it would make sense that those bikes are getting discounted and maybe there's not enough new bikes coming into the country under the tariffs yet to really have an effect on pricing.
Yeah, and it's so complicated, right? And we don't have, like, not to jump the gun to a potential future question of sort of like where, what data don't we have, but like we don't have all the data. And so some of it is just triangulating the best that we can given our current data. But it's very convoluted and very complicated with how the supply chains are working, even under the best of circumstances. But right now with the economic conditions, yeah, that just makes it even harder to kind of tease out what exactly is going on, how much, old stock is there still in supplier warehouses, how much old stock is there on IBD retailers, shelves or sales floors. So it's interesting times to say the least.
Mark and I both go to the Bicycle Leadership Conference every year, so we've seen you there. And one of the charts we've seen you guys put up in your panel is like looking ahead in the next 5 years of bicycle growth. E-bikes are growing, regular bikes are not really in your projections. Tell us about the growth of e-bikes and where they're going versus, pedal bikes.
Yes, well, certainly it's hit the news and hit the headlines, even sort of outside of the industry. E-bikes are a huge, huge thing. And certainly it's one of the kind of most pressing and most glaring pieces that we're watching all the time because everybody's curious. Yeah, what's happening? Is it growing? Is it not growing? Is it going to plateau? So what's interesting is, like I said, we work with the S&P Global and they put out this forecast for us. And prior to earlier this year, the only source of data for sales data that we really had was Circana, which is IBD and rest of market. So that includes kind of your mass merchant, your Walmarts, your Amazons. But all we had was what was happening at retail and online at IBD, online at Walmart.com. What we did not have was direct to consumer. And as we all know, that's kind of been another interesting development is that just a lot of brands have either added that, brands that sell into retail are now also selling direct to consumer. But we've also seen a huge proliferation of those brands who are selling solely direct to consumer. So earlier this year, long story short, we started incorporating the direct to consumer data that we now have as of March. And we've been putting that into this demand model. And what's ended up happening is those really rosy forecasts that we had for e-bikes are getting less and less rosy kind of every quarter when the update on that report is run. And some of that is just because we projected that there was this demand for bicycles, basing it a little bit on like the European model, where we know the US will never exactly be Europe, but we didn't necessarily have anything to compare it to historically. And so what we've seen is we're off the European model now for sure, but also a lot of that demand was already being met in the direct to consumer channel, and especially at the lower end, at the e-bike end, like roughly 70% of bikes sold direct to consumer in dollars, 70% are e-bikes. A lot of those are kind of throttle driven e-bikes. Some of them are, beyond the 3-class system that we know and love. So some of those are kind of, out of class throttle driven e-bikes. And so what we've kind of determined is there's not going to be as much growth as we originally thought. We're a little bit closer to that plateau than we had originally anticipated, and much of that is just already being met.
That's super interesting. So your forecasts looking forward are not as rosy, as you said, as they would have been like 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think at one point, maybe a year ago, we were projecting, like looking longer term, we were projecting sort of a 10% growth sort of from an e-bike unit standpoint. And now we're looking at 2026, might not be much growth, if any, and then 2027, 2028, potential contraction. And so some of that is just due to economic conditions, right? Like the tariff impact maybe was actually less than we all anticipated, and some of the tariff impact may end up being realized in 2026 as prices kind of, start at the factories and move their way down kind of through the supply chain. And so there's just a lot of questions up in the air. And at the end of the day, the bike is a discretionary purchase for most people, at least in America. It's not necessarily a transportation piece. And so when it's time to cut something, discretionary income, bikes might be one of the pieces that gets cut.
And you're gathering this data from a wide range of sources, and I'm assuming most of that data is quantitative. Do you mix qualitative data in, or do you have a way to kind of, because what Peter and I have all the qualitative data of the fields and how people in the industry are feeling, but we rarely get the quantitative, and we never get it together. And I'm wondering if you're able to kind of blend those two for a picture that is maybe even more realistic.
Yeah, and certainly the key piece that we've been zooming in on lately is kind of this core versus casual participant, which uses a lot of the data from those two participation studies I mentioned, and a lot of that is really the qualitative of asking folks sort of what their feelings are and breaking those survey respondents out into, okay, I ride less than 24 times a year, so I'm casual, versus I ride more than 24 times a year, 25 times a year, whatever our cutoff is. And so that's kind of more the enthusiast. And so we're trying to marry that data, as difficult as it can be, to what we're seeing in the sales trends. Because, I can't always see like price band information when I'm looking at the quantitative sales data. So I can't necessarily see like what's happening at that super enthusiast, and does that make sense with what we're hearing from kind of the enthusiast rider on these surveys. But we know that casual riders are up. The casual ridership is increasing. Sort of, if we look at the whole, all riders are up, but that growth is really happening at the casual level. It's not necessarily much change up or down at the enthusiast level. Certainly, a lot of the supply, a lot of the suppliers rely a lot on those enthusiasts who are the repeat customers, the comeback customers, sort of average lifetime value, much higher than the lower end casual rider who's maybe bought a bike several years ago. Maybe they bought one during the pandemic and they've only ridden it a handful of times. And so what we're trying to do is look in that qualitative data and see, what can we do? What can we tease out? And how can we really amplify this ridership that's out there to turn the folks who might be able to be turned on into more enthusiast riders, or at least just bring them up a little bit. And for those who can't or won't, or, they're happy riding once a year, how do we meet them where they're at?
That's cool. Thanks, Liam. That's really interesting that, sort of those two components, enthusiast riders versus casual riders. That's a very interesting contrast. So building on that as it relates to the bike industry, Liam, does the bike industry have any blind spots? Are there white spaces out there the bike industry is not serving and not quite understanding yet? And if you see those in your research, what are those?
Yeah, so I've been with People for Bikes for a year and a half, so I'll kind of go a little bit back in time. But about 2.5, 3 years ago, we had no visibility into the used sales market. We had no visibility into the direct to consumer market. So People for Bikes has now satisfied both of those. 2 years ago, or last year, I should say, kind of March of last year, we put out the used market tracking service, and so we're looking at like peer-to-peer, Craigslist, Facebook, Mercari, eBay. And we're able to see kind of what's going on in the used market. A lot of it is kind of pressures that happen at retail end up getting pushed down to the used market. So really fun insights there. Direct to consumer, we launched that this March at the BLC. That's super exciting. So now we've closed up that hole. The question then is sort of, okay, now what? One of the big pieces that we don't have is really like the Amazon third party kind of marketplace. Certainly one that has been, burgeoning in the last year and a half, 2 years. And so when we look at our Circana data and we look at the rest of market, we're looking at kind of Amazon first party sales, but we don't get to see any of that stuff that is happening on the third party marketplace. And so that's really one of kind of the final frontiers is really having visibility into that. From a qualitative standpoint, there's a ton. Like if we had, unlimited fundings, if any of your listeners want to make a donation, we're always willing to accept. Liam at PeopleForBikes.org. Add more funding. We would love to do more studies on the consumer. So like things like what the Outdoor Industries Association has put out. OIA has done some studies on kind of the casual versus core. And that's really where we're at is trying to kind of learn more about these consumers, and especially consumers who maybe were never part of the bike industry in the past, who bought direct to consumer and maybe don't even go into a shop, don't really know about bike shops. Those are the sorts of pieces that are missing that we want to add.
When you talk about direct to consumer and those platform used bike buys, purchases, how do you gather data on that? I think it's interesting, and I'd love to know more, because my gut feeling is a lot more people are buying bikes secondhand because it just seems like a great deal, and there's not these huge leaps anymore in technology. I'm wondering just how you gather that data and what is involved in it.
Yeah, so we work with our partner, Peter Woolery at Bicycle Market Research, and he is able to kind of scrape these websites and put together kind of an inference, and certainly would love to go more into it if anybody's interested. But we're effectively looking at, like for Craigslist, we're not ever able to actually determine that a sale happened because the software, the platform doesn't really support that. But for eBay, we're able to see when sales happen. So we're able to track listings, able to track listing prices. We use sort of large language models and kind of AI to be able to categorize these things so that we can say, like, again, the data is oftentimes only as good as the user puts out there. So if a person just puts out road bike large, we don't have much necessarily to go on. But we're effectively then categorizing it, saying what it listed at, saying what it sold at, and then we're able to put those things together and marry kind of what's going on with listing prices versus sales prices. We do that on eBay. We do that on Facebook Marketplace, which again does also have like the sold ability, but we're making a lot of inferences as well. And so it's a lot of scraping data and then making sense of the scraped data.
That's great. Thank you. Mark, I think we could just move on to our final question now. Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds perfect. So Liam, one of the things that we ask people regularly is about their first bike. And it could be actually the first bike that you got, or it could be the first, like, oh, this turned me into somebody who loves to ride bikes bike. But we'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of first bikes. I won't tell you about the Huffy that was underneath a blanket around Christmas time, maybe, don't want to date myself, but 35 years ago, which I'll always remember that. It's like one of the first memories. But I'll go with the one that kind of changed me into, like, I wouldn't be sitting right here if it weren't for it. It was a 2001 matte blue specialized delay. I actually just 2 years ago donated it to Boulder. Oh, now I can't even remember the name of the nonprofit there in Boulder. But I donated it to them after many, many years of loving that bike. I technically raced on it in college. It was like a very entry level Sora components, like the old school ones that you're campy style, almost awkward campy style. Yes, and yeah, that got me into racing. I did my first probably like 10 or 12 races on it. I ended up, having a career in bike racing for a while. So like certainly wouldn't have done that. I worked at Workstand for a long, long time, and I kind of got to Boulder because of wanting to be out there to race bikes. That's what sort of got me at Workstand Smart Detailing. And so, yeah, if it weren't for that specialized delay that I got, I guess my sophomore or junior year of college, sort of my first real bike. And I copied a friend who had just gotten a Trek 1000, and I was like, ooh, I got to get something like that too. So shout out to Spin Doctor Cycle Works in Bartlett, Illinois.
Love it. All right. Liam Donoghue, who handles research at People4Bikes. Thank you so much. And again, if you're interested in supporting or following People4Bikes, we highly recommend it. It's an amazing organization, PeopleForBikes.org. You can find them all over, and their events and their people are just amazing. So, Liam, thank you so much. That was a great discussion, and we learned a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. And hopefully, Liam, we can have you back on. I'd love to have you. I could have you on every week because I love what you work on. So hopefully we can get you on again.
I appreciate it, Mark and Peter. I would love to come back. Thank you.
All right. Liam, that was a really good episode. So interesting, diving into the data, right?
We're going to have him back again. He's great.
Okay. So, Mark, it's the end of the show. We're going to get into the freewheeling section of the show where we just talk about like what's on our mind this week. And I would say, like, for me, I'm thinking a lot about bike racing. It's early in the season. Cyclocross has been going. First of all, Matthew Van der Poel is dominant. He's like winning solo every race, right? It's unbelievable. And I think back to the ride that you and I did with him, like when was that? Early November, maybe, or October. And it was just amazing to ride with him in person and meet him. What a nice guy. And so it's so cool to see him winning. All right. The next thing I'm thinking about is like the race season, the pro race season is like, it's here now. Like Australian Nationals are happening in Australia as we speak. The Tour Down Under is coming next week. The Vuelta El Salvador in El Salvador is happening. One of my friends who lives in Girona, Elena Ullan, is coming over to do that race on the Spanish team. I'm very excited to root for her. And like, it is on, like cycling season is here, like now. So that's exciting. And then the last thing I'm thinking about, Mark, you brought this up to me, but obviously the Olympics are coming in under 2.5 years, and ticket sales start next week on the 14th. And yeah, and it's basically a draw for tickets. I mean, it's like a lottery. So you got to, I guess, put in your preferences and then they'll tell you what you got. But the lottery opens up on the 14th. So I'm excited to like see some track racing and maybe mountain bike racing. I don't know if we need tickets for mountain bike racing or if like you can just walk up in that park. The road race or the time trial, we'll just like go out to the course, I guess, and cheer from the side of the road. Mark, what's on your mind this week?
Well, the reason I brought up the tickets for LA was I had a call with USA Cycling today. Really love those people and want to help as much as I can. And I think doing a fundraiser in LA for the Olympics soon, like next year, to generate money for the team. Because when you look at what they need, they have some really specific asks that we could help out with. Like, they need housing for coaches and riders near the velodrome. There's things we can do. They're pretty easy to just activate all the people we know and to raise some money for these great men and women who are racing for USA Cycling in the Olympics. So that's definitely something I hope we can flesh out.
That's a great idea. I love that idea so much. And I'm excited to try and get that going with you. That's great. Love that.
And the other thing I was on a couple different calls with brands today who were talking about 32-inch wheel mountain bikes. That is coming in hot and heavy. And by Sea Otter, I think you're going to see almost every major brand have a 32-inch hardtail that people would be racing on. I heard from one of the brands that one of the most decorated racers ever in mountain biking has been testing one of these 32-inch bikes. And this person is pretty short of stature. They're not incredibly tall, which normally they might not like a bigger wheel, but they said it's way faster than they've ever thought. And it's an even bigger jump than it was from 26 to 29. So that jump is significant. And I think you will see all the racers on 32s next year, at least in courses where you can use a hardtail. I don't know that brands will have full suspension bikes totally done for next year. It seems like that's probably a reach.
Interesting. And I'll just point out that we did put that last month in our trends report. That was one of the tech trends was 32-inch wheels are on the way. And so what you're doing is validating that. And yeah, I'm super interested to actually try those out.
Yeah, me too. I've never ridden one.
Okay, that's great, Mark. Thank you. All right, well, that'll wrap it up for today. That was a great episode. Thanks again to Liam, our guest, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Talk soon.